G'day guys, Log here. I'd like to welcome you over to the channel. So guys, it's about the time where we take a look at the current meta in Apex, before we can expect some meta changes to Apex Legends in the next update with the Aftermarket Collection event. So guys, in today's video we're going to be doing something very new and something you've probably never seen on YouTube before. That's right, we're going to be doing a tier list. Wow, oh my god, I bet you guys have never seen that before, eh? So I won't explain how these videos work because of course I think you guys should know how it goes. But if a legend needs a buff or a nerf, we will discuss possible changes that can happen to the legend. So one more thing guys, before we start this tier list, I'd like to remind you guys to quickly click the subscribe button with the notification bell turned on, as I post 2 to 3 videos a week covering leaks, rumours and information about Apex Legends. And I will just mention as well that as a Caustic main, I will be purchasing all the items with the upcoming Aftermarket Collection event, and we'll be getting the Caustic heirloom. And actually as well, I will be showing off the sledgehammer off in the firing range. So if you guys like watching people piss money away, then stay tuned for that. But anyway guys, let's get into this tier list. So if I think I'm being honest, this season so far has actually been one of the most balanced seasons when it comes to legend balance. Now of course there are a few outliers which we'll take a look at in this tier list today. So today we'll be starting with the worst legend in Apex Legends, and the only legend I've placed in D tier. Now this may tick off a few people, but I think the worst legend in Apex has to be Loba. Now I know she had a lot of hype coming in when she was introduced to Apex Legends at the start of Season 5, and she looked like the real deal. Now the reason why I believe that Loba is the worst legend in Apex right now is purely about her ultimate. So her black market boutique before the start of Season 5 sounded almost overpowered. Being able to grab as much loot as you can in a certain area sounded awesome. Or so we thought. The catch was there's only allowed to grab 2 items from her black market boutique. And my biggest problem with this is grabbing 1 stack of ammo counts as 1 item. To give you an example of how annoying this is, so let's say you're in mid game and you only have an alternate and a triple take, but you see a prowler in the black market. You can only grab 60 heavy ammo and the prowler, which doesn't make any sense. You probably would have better luck just looking around the map to find some ammo and a decent gun. So in one of my previous videos, you would have heard that Loba is getting a buff/rework, probably in the next update. But unfortunately, it only looks like it's going to be a faster cooldown to her ultimate, which in my opinion is not enough. If I was to give my opinion on a substantial buff for Loba, I would start with her ult allowing people to grab 4 items instead of 2. So that way you can change your weapon and grab at least 2 stacks of ammo and even an attachment. Now I don't think that sounds unreasonable. Another buff that I'd give to Loba is to give her full mobility when throwing her tactical, so she's not a sitting duck when she's throwing her bracelet. Now I think that's a good start at least, and hopefully if with a buff like that, it would push her up in this tier list. So the next legend we'll be taking a look at is the only legend that I've placed in C tier, which is Octane. So I think a few people won't be happy with this decision to put Octane in C tier, but let me explain my reasoning behind this. So I think everyone can agree that Octane isn't the best legend in Apex by any stretch of the imagination, but he can put in some good work, like getting himself to high ground with a jump pad, and with his newest buff being able to move quicker while healing when he's stimming. Plus he's also a very fun legend to play in pubs, being able to move from fight to fight quicker than any other legend by stim spamming. However, he doesn't have many attributes to help the team other than his jump pad, which is, by the way, probably a budget version of Pathfinder's zipline. And with Mirage's Season 5 buff, he and Loba really only have one ability that helps their squad, which is the reason why both of the legends are at the bottom of this Season 6 tier list. Now, if I had the opportunity to buff Octane, I'd firstly let him be able to do everything faster, meaning healing faster and rezzing teammates faster. Now, I don't mean healing faster like as fast as the gold body shield used to be, but being able to heal and res teammates faster would, one, help Octane a lot more, but also give him another aspect to his abilities to help his team. So now guys, let's get into the first legend I've placed in B tier, and we'll start with Bangalore. Now Bangalore really hasn't received a lot of love since launch of Apex Legends. Now in the most recent update, Bangalore did receive a slight buff, which was a cooldown to her ult being halved, but it really hasn't seen her being used much more this season, or make her much of a better legend. Now I do think her abilities do help her team to an extent, however abilities can be combated quite easily. So her smoke can be is a good tool to get your team out of a sticky situation, but can easily be combated by digi threats, or even Bloodhound's ultimate when running through the smoke. Now her ult can be very good if used correctly. I think her ult can be used more of a repositioning tool rather than an offensive use. Now sure, it can be used in an offensive way, but used as a positioning tool in my opinion does make her a lot more effective. Now I do have a suggestion to help Bangalore with a buff to her ultimate ability, because I don't think her tactical or passive abilities really need a change. So if Bangalore received a buff in the next update, I think that her ultimate should be similar, but instead of her dropping her bombs on the ground for them to explode a couple of seconds later, I would rather Bangalore be able to deploy the airstrike and then allow her to choose when she wants to explode the bombs. Now, I think this could be really good for a team to rotate, make it much easier, but I do think it would make it a lot more useful to stop teams from chasing after you and thirsting a teammate. Imagine if you were trying to reposition in a fight, but all of a sudden one of your teammates gets knocked. In a normal situation, you may have to either leave your teammate behind or risk dying while trying to res your teammate. But if you're able to throw your ult on top of yourself or in front of the enemy squad, you quickly pop the res and either explode the ult on top of yourself or hold it and wait for your enemy squad to try and push you. Now, I don't think this one change would make Bangalore an S tier legend, but it would give her some uniqueness and would give her a much better tool for team play. So guys, we get to the next legend in B tier now, which is the newest legend to come with Season 6, which of course is Rampart. Now, Rampart probably didn't receive some of the hype that Revenant and Loba got in their previous introductions to their seasons, but I definitely do think that Rampart's actually a better legend compared to Revenant at the start of Season 4 and Loba at the start of Season 5. Now, Rampart is a very defensive legend, which her tactical and ultimate accommodating to a more passive and campy playstyle, but can be used to help your teammate, for example, using the barriers to res teammates and help your team by placing the barriers in certain positions to deal more damage. Can be really clutch for your team. However, her abilities are very one-dimensional and situational. The fact that the majority of the time you will only use her minigun when you're camping on high ground in late game makes one of her abilities very situational, but because of the minigun is so powerful, it does make it a very good ultimate. At this stage, with her time in Apex, I don't think she needs a buff or a nerf, but maybe in the future her minigun could be slowed somewhat. But because she's the newest legend, I think she's in a good spot for now. Alright guys, the next legend we'll be taking a look at in this tier list, which is Mirage. So Mirage received a lot of buffs at the start of Season 5, with a huge rework which made him, for the first time in Apex, actually a relevant legend. With the fact that he could bamboozle enemies with his decoys and be able to interact with his decoys, made him a pretty decent legend. But the major buff for Mirage was the fact that when he res his teammate, he was completely visible. But then Respawn had to fuck with him slightly by making his hollows on his skin light up when he res his teammates. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't make him useless like he was in Season 4, but still a little bit annoying. Now, unfortunately for Mirage, I couldn't put him any higher than B tier for two reasons. One being the fact that he still isn't a legend that can be utilized in a team game like Apex Legends, and secondly, the fact that there are still legends in the game that are still better in the current meta. Now, if I was to buff Mirage, I'd probably allow him to go invisible when he's rezzing like he was previously, and also when he was at the Season 4, which I don't think should have been changed, his ultimate, he should still stay invisible, so he can both help his team and get away from fights. So now guys, we're up to the final legend in B tier, which is Pathfinder. So Pathfinder has always been a favourite in Apex Legends, with some awesome skins and unique abilities which take a lot of skill to master. With his grapple being able to get to high ground for himself, or even to move into a better position in fights, makes Pathfinder a great offensive legend, and of course his zipline, giving him and his teammates high ground and better positioning, which makes Pathfinder a great supportive legend. But since he has been nerfed a lot of times in the last few patches, his usage and viability has really taken a hit. With Pathfinder's nerf to his grapple and the fact that now all scouting legends get Pathfinder's passive of being able to scan survey beacons, makes him probably the worst scouting legend, and also the fact that Crypto and Bloodhound have got significant buffs in the last few updates has made Pathfinder a less viable legend in the current meta. And that the fact that Pathfinder has the low profile passive ability, which takes 5% extra damage from incoming projectiles and bullets, is just cruel in my opinion. Now, in a recent video of mine, we did talk about how the devs at Respawn teased that the Pathfinder will be receiving some love soon. Now, will that be with this update for the Aftermarket Collection event? I mean, who knows? But let's get into how I would personally buff Pathfinder. Now, I think Pathfinder is probably the easiest legend to buff. So if I was to buff Pathfinder, I would get rid of his low profile passive ability and reduce his cooldown of his grapple from 35 seconds to 25 seconds. A simple change, but it is needed for Pathfinder. So now guys, let's get into A tier, where we start with Gibraltar. Now, in previous seasons of Apex Legends, Gibraltar has gone from the worst legend to one of the best. Now, I think since other legends have been buffed in recent seasons, Gibraltar is no longer the best legend and is no longer overpowered, but I still think he does need a slight nerf. And I think if they were to give a nerf to Gibraltar, I think it needs to be to his gun shield. I still think the gun shield needs to be lowered from 50 health to 25 health. Now, I won't go into too much detail about Gibby being an A tier, because I do think he is a very viable legend in the current meta, and he's probably on par with Lifeline as the best supportive legend. So now guys, we get to the most offensive legend in Apex, which is Wattson. So Wattson is an A tier, and of course has some really big pros for being the fact that she can shut off doorways with her fences, and her trophy system being able to stop throwables, Caustic's gas grenade, and both Bangalore and Gibraltar's airstrikes. But she does have a few issues, one obviously being the fact that she has really no offensive attributes, which of course isn't really needed if she's paired with 2 offensive legends. It's obviously not that big of an issue when playing ranked, but obviously when you're playing pubs, she doesn't really have the funnest sort of abilities. But the biggest issue with Watson really isn't her fault. It's the fact that the footstep audio in Apex is such an issue that when a team is approaching you, when her trophy system is set up, you won't even hear them coming from behind you. It's insane the amount of times I've played with a Watson in my team and have been snuck up on by an enemy squad because of the bad footstep audio. So Watson, I think, is in a really good position right now, and there's no need for a buff or a nerf. Alright guys, let's get to the last legend we have in A tier today, which is Crypto. So Crypto, if you didn't know, has been probably one of the worst legends in Season 3 and 4, but has received a lot of love in recent seasons, which has made him a really viable legend, especially in ranked. So Crypto's biggest weapon is obviously his EMP, being able to shock enemies and destroy gas traps, Watson's fences, and Watson's trophy system. And obviously being able to jump into his drone and spot enemies can also be very clutch. So if it wasn't for the fact that Crypto had to jump into his drone and get out of fights, I would honestly be putting him in S tier. And I know that his drone is an attribute he has that a lot of legends don't, being able to scan, but he's the only legend that has to get out of a fight to use his abilities. In saying that, I do think that Crypto is in a really good spot right now, so I think to leave him alone would probably be the best way to go. So guys, now we're up to the final tier, which is the S tier legends. So in my opinion, every one of the S tier legends bar one needs to get a nerf to some capacity. So let's start with the first legend that I have in S tier, which is Lifeline. So Lifeline did receive a pretty substantial buff when the Lost Treasures Collection event came in Season 5, with the main buff being the fact that her drone is able to res teammates so that Lifeline can continue fighting without having to get out of the fight and res her teammates herself. And to be honest, I actually think this is a really good decision by Respawn to be able to allow Lifeline's drone to res teammates. However, the fact that she gets a shield is way too much. The amount of times I've seen people downing enemies multiple times to then have their Lifeline constantly resing their teammates is incredibly overpowered and in my opinion needs to be removed. But I do think her drone should be able to res teammates, and I think that'll make Lifeline a more balanced legend. So the next legend we'll be taking a look at in S tier is Bloodhound. So Bloodhound received a lot of love at the start of Season 6, mainly to Bloodhound's ultimate. The fact that when Bloodhound uses their ultimate, Bloodhound can scan every 6 seconds, which if you think about it is basically having someone in your squad who can basically wall hack. Which, don't get me wrong, I think is actually a good buff for Bloodhound, but I do think it does need a slight nerf. So I don't actually think that Bloodhound is incredibly overpowered, but I do think that a slight nerf to the cooldown of Bloodhound's scan in his ult needs to be toned down a little bit. From probably 6 seconds to 8 seconds, allowing 3 scans instead of 4 is perfectly fine nerf for Bloodhound. It would make him a little bit less overpowered. So guys, let's now get into my main man, which is Caustic. So I think Caustic actually needs a huge buff to allow him to phase and have multiple gas grenades so he can throw them as many times as he wants. In fact, I don't think he actually needs any sort of change whatsoever. But in all seriousness, I do think that Caustic actually does need a slight nerf. Now, when he got a buff at the start of Season 5, there was a lot of hate for Caustic because of the fact the only way you can actually combat a Caustic is using Caustic. And to be honest, the only buff that Caustic actually received in that update was the fact that teammates can now move freely through his gas, which doesn't seem like a lot, but the fact that this little buff made him a lot more used in the current meta is the reason why people have the issue with Caustic. Now, I don't think they can revert the Caustic buff to the way that he was before because Apex Legends is a team-based game, so I think teammates should be able to move through friendly gas freely. But I've been thinking about this, and I think a possible way to combat Caustic's gas is to add a feature to the gold helmet that if you have the gold helmet equipped, it would not allow you to be affected by slowing effects. So what this means is it doesn't affect you through gas. Now you'll obviously get damage, but you still won't be slowed from gas, things like airstrikes and Crypto's EMP. But at least then you can push through a room without being slowed. Now maybe leave a comment down below if you think there is a possible nerf for Caustic which wouldn't render him useless. Now guys, I think everyone knows that this legend was always going to be in S tier, and that is obviously Wraith. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about why Wraith is in S tier. I mean, she is the best legend in Apex. She has solo attributes and team attributes to make her the ultimate legend. Now in saying that, I don't think she needs a nerf at all. Even though I do hate the fact that when Wraith phases out when I'm about to down her, I don't think they could honestly nerf her, because the big reason of why people actually play Apex Legends is because she is so overpowered. Well, not so overpowered, but overpowered enough to the point where you kind of need a Wraith in your team to win a lot of matches. Alright guys, let's get into the final legend for today's tier list video, and in my opinion is the most overpowered legend in the game, which is Revenant. So I think that Revenant really needs a nerf. Now I know I just said that Wraith is the best legend in Apex, but I don't think that Wraith is OP. And I think, to be honest, it is just his ultimate ability that needs to be changed. It's got to the point now where I actually don't play ranked anymore due to the fact that everyone is still running Revenant and only pushing fights when they're in Revolt. Now I know how incredibly bad Revenant was when he launched in Season 4, so I understand why Respawn almost overbuffed Revenant to an extent, but I think now it's time to nerf the old. Now if I had to nerf Revenant, I would first lower his health to 25 health when returning back to the totem, and not allow you to use your abilities while in Revolt. I think this is a fair nerf to Revenant to start off with, because at least now, if that was a nerf, at least you would have to weigh up if it's a good idea to push a fight, knowing that you will be without abilities. Alright guys, that's all the legends we have in this tier list video today. Now of course this is just my opinion, however if you guys have a different opinion, maybe leave a comment down below of where you would put every legend on a tier list. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a like, and also subscribe to the channel with the notification bell turned on, as I post 2 to 3 videos a week covering leaks, rumours and information about Apex Legends. And remember guys, stay tuned because I'll be putting out a video when the Caustic heirloom comes out of me buying all the items and showing off the Caustic heirloom. But anyway guys, Dilly Dog will catch you all later.